You don't want that on, do you?
No, I got it.
The TV?
No, it's off.
No, it's on.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Philly Sports, the old school. Tonight we are going to get into the Philadelphia Eagles top 12 receivers from Tommy Mcdonald to Terrell Owens. So take a ride in the Delorean with us and check it all out, as we are going to recap some of the great players in Philadelphia Eagles history. So welcome and thanks for checking us out. But I'm going to introduce our panel here. I got Uncle Mark Sullivan to my left,
Joe.
cousin Roger to his left,
cousin Joe.
So I got to be honest, I was very, very excited to do this tonight, and I hope the people out there can, reminisce a little bit about some old days.
We're a little rusty from being.
Yeah, we took a hiatus for a bit.
Now hiatus.
Yeah, well, now we're with Edge of Philly Sports, and
so if we stumble or bumble, you know why.
We're now with Edge of Philly Sports, the #1 podcast network in the city of Philadelphia in the Delaware Valley, and we're humbled and proud to be with them. We're also still with Devereaux Sports, which is also an outstanding group, and we're proud to be and humbled and proud to be with them as well. And our goal is to take this show nationwide in 3 years. That's my personal goal. I put that on my Facebook page today, and I swear by it. So what we're going to be doing is today, like my nephew Joe just said, we're going to focus on the top 12 Eagles receivers from, say, about the late 1950s till Terrell Owens, the early 2004. And let me just give you a preface of where we're going to be going with this show. We're going to try to make it as interactive as possible. I know when I prepared our podcast notes for this, I put some questions in to invite fan participation, and we're going to be doing that with every show, and I'll give you the calendar for the remainder of the year. We're going to be going we're going to go twice a month. So today is our first show. 2 weeks from now, we're going to do what did I say? It was going to be 2 weeks from now what did I say it was going to be? I told you.
The biggest douchebags in Philadelphia sports.
Next week. Yes, next week. I'm sorry.
Yeah, biggest D-bags in Philadelphia sports history.
In Philadelphia sports history, and how we're gonna do that is we're gonna have our own little listing, and it's gonna be like, we'll name some people, and then it's gonna be like the NCAA tournament. We're gonna have the Sweet 16, the Elite 8, the Final Four, and then you're gonna have your champion, and that's the champion we select. And we're strongly invite people to comment and sit there and throw their own in, and because we have our own for our own reasons.
I gotta think that Ben Simmons has to be close to a #1 seed up in there.
You're getting warm, but let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. You're getting warm, but there's others, and then
this is totally subjective, obviously.
Yeah, and if you guys get on there, and if anybody gets on there and says that I'm a D-bag. I'm going to have a shirt. I'm thinking about getting a shirt and hat that says that. So I'll beat you to the punch. Okay? But then we're doing 2 shows in December. One is going to be on arguably the greatest athlete in the second half of the 20th century, a guy that came from Philadelphia. His name is Wilton Norman Chamberlain. And then our last show, just before Christmas, we're going to go back to the Buddy Ryan years, which is really exciting. And then I'll talk about the new year, because I have a whole host of ideas for the new year. We're going to talk about having debates. We're going to certainly have guests, and so it's and not only we're going to do Philly sports, we're also going to do some other things as well. So it should be very entertaining, extremely educational, especially if and it's going to bring back some memories for people. And so again, we really invite commentary, and so please dial in or punch up on the the screen that my nephew will see.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I like doing stuff like this so much, because you can go back in the day. I mean, people can reminisce about when they were in the vet, and it's not even about sports. I mean, well, it is about sports, but you're in the. I remember this kid Tony that was my buddy Johnny Teets' best friend. He met his future wife, and they were like making out in the 700 level. You know what I mean? I remember how many people got stories of like people getting laid in the 700 level. You know what I mean? Like all kinds of different things that takes them back in the memories. You know,
there was a girl when she was with WIP. And years ago, and she had sex with her boyfriend at a Phillies game back when the Phillies were.
The Phillies, I can understand. Football.
Yeah.
Well, football you couldn't. Yeah, I was mostly talking Phillies. Like, yeah, if you're
yeah.
700 level or whatever,
well,
you know.
I can't remember her name now, but I mean, yeah, she was on WIP, and I remember Angelo Cataldi talking about it. Yeah. She also did the sports on Channel 17 or something for a while as well. Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll have to look her up.
Yeah. I'll have to see if I.
So we're going to get into it here, but just like you said, you know, for the comments, we got our own Al Safari. You can check Al out, Edge of Philly Sports. He's all over the network.
We're also on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and there's one other form of social media that we're on.
Here's our man, the Gobbler, Pat Bernard. You can check him out on Sunday nights. Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. Edge of Philly Sports. So make sure you check him out. But yeah, you know, let's get into it here. I mean,
let's do it.
You know, Philadelphia Eagles. You know, you wouldn't know it by the Andy Reid era, and well, until they got Terrell Owens. But the knock on the Eagles was they had no wide receivers. You know, James Trash, Todd Stinkston. You know, Nay Brown. I mean, my God, those guys sucked. You know, Charles Johnson. You know, but if you look throughout this franchise, I mean, you know, I'm looking at your notes here, and like, you know, this franchise has had quite a few great receivers.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like you said, we're going from Tommy McDonald all the way to T.O. and then even after T.O., you got Deshaun Jackson, Jeremy Maclin, and now this modern day, you know,
probably have
I was gonna say A.J. Brown reminds me of a poor man's T.O.
They probably have their best threesome of collective wide receivers on this team
in a while.
Oh yeah.
You mentioned Andy Reid. Probably the best receiver on his team turned out to be Brian Westbrook.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and obviously he was a running back, but as far as pass plays, he was always at.
Oh yeah,
with the out screens and.
Yeah, I got my man Christopher Peasy here talking about Freddie Mitchell, fourth down Freddie. He's like more nicknames than touchdowns, and the thing, and that's true. And
Fred X.
Yeah, Fred X.
26.
Yeah, but you can never take that away from him, though.
No.
That and the play on Monday night against Dallas, where McNabb ran around for like 20. It seemed like it was 20 years, and he hit him on like an 80-yard pass or whatever. I mean, that was like that was tremendous, you know.
Yeah, sure.
But let's get into it here. All right, so we got Tommy McDonald, number one, but you have an interesting note here. You said this is actually very interesting, and Pat Bernard in particular would think this is interesting.
That's if he does. That's if he may already know this. Maybe he doesn't. He and his brother Chuck. But basically, in my research, I found like as a footnote, a lot of people know that the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets were the precursor to the Eagles. But at one time, they had a 9,000-seat stadium right at Frankfurt Avenue and Devereux Street. Now, Devereux Street is where Pat and Chuck are from. I don't know if they know that. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. Maybe that's where their house was built. I have no idea. But just thought that just a little interesting tidbit of sports history.
Well, if
in Northeast Philadelphia.
Well, I was going to say, if their house was burned on that, my man Pat, you know, I would have thought you would have got a little bit more football knowledge, my buddy. No, I'm just kidding. But all right, so let's get into it here. 12 best receivers from 1957 to 05. You know, we start off with Tommy McDonald. Arguably, you know, would you say possibly the greatest one they've ever had in franchise history? I mean, he's definitely a Hall of Famer.
Oh yeah, he is in the Hall of Fame. He's the smallest guy that's ever been inducted into the Hall of Fame. Yeah, I mean I saw him play as a kid. I mean, we were kids. Roger and I were kids, and anybody that saw him play, I mean, the thing that always impressed me about him was the fact that he always was open and he could always catch anything. it was interesting. And I had, in doing my research on him, I found that he always liked to scrape his fingers, tops of his fingers, like against like concrete or something. And then he would bite his fingernails real short so they would bleed. So then when he'd go into the game, his fingers would be really sensitive. And then he always felt that helped him make the catch and hold the ball. Yeah, just found that to be an interesting, just goes to show how idiosyncratic, pro athletes are.
Well, if you compared him to modern times, would he be like a Cooper Kupp? Would that be the type of player he was? Was a Cooper Kupp or like a Wes Welker or something like that?
I was thinking of Wes Welker.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say, because he could do everything that Welker could do. But I see more of a Kupp because he was a little smaller.
Right.
But Kupp is always open. He's always open. I mean, that guy is amazing. I mean, the Super Bowl. Look at that Super Bowl he had.
Right.
MVP.
And as good as Wes Welker was, and he was tremendous. I mean, Wes Welker might have been the best slot receiver I've ever seen. Well, him and Edelman. I mean, one thing about New England, they always find a guy like him. You know what I mean, like that. But I guess Tommy McDonald would be more like a Cooper Kupp because Cooper Kupp, is that high end guy. I mean, Cooper Kupp the dude's amazing. Nobody can stop him.
No,
maybe we should say Cooper Kupp is a
reincarnation of Tommy McDonald.
Tommy McDonald because of the predating.
Well,
what I remember about Tommy McDonald, I don't know if it was his whole career, but the better portion of his career, he never had he was one of the last players to not use a face mask.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't recall if he went his entire career and at the last 2 seasons of his career where he was required to use.
Yeah, but he was granted. Yeah, but I mean,
I can clearly he was, and on the Eagles he was like the only one.
Yeah, because he was grandfathered. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and he was elusive. He didn't miss a lot of time due to injury. When he was drafted in '57, he was an All-American running back out of University of Oklahoma in the mid-'50s, and they won 47 consecutive games. They were national champions. He was a 2-time consensus All-American. He was he won the Maxwell Award, which a lot of great players have won in the NFL. He was third in the Heisman Trophy behind Paul Hornung and Johnny Majors, and that year Jim Brown came in 5th. So he came in higher than Jim Brown. Was drafted by the Eagles 3rd round. He originally started, he was a running back, and then he was a return man, just like Welker. And then they decided to move him to the wide receiver position.
Yeah, this is a real
split end, they called it back then.
This is a real interesting one to me because it's obvious because he wore number 25. Well, LaShawn McCoy wore 25. So obviously, can't believe the Eagles didn't retire his number.
I know.
And you look at this guy right here. He's member of the Eagles Hall of Fame, 5-time Pro Bowler. Like as you were saying, he caught the big 35-yard touchdown pass in the '60 championship game. So the guy was clutch. He had a pair of balls about him.
Oh yeah.
Only missed 3 games in 11 years due to injury. I mean that's incredible right here.
The year after the championship game, he did what Kupp did last year. He led the league in receiving yards, TDs, and he did it in yards per game. He didn't have catches. Kupp had the most catches, but he only missed 3 games. Then what happened was in '64, the Eagles hired a guy by the name of Joe Q. Herrick to be the coach. And
Joe must go.
Joe must go. If anybody's old enough, they'll remember that. This guy was he was a douchebag. He may make our show.
Yeah. I was gonna say, old timers will definitely name him a douchebag.
He looked, if you ever saw the movie The Blues Brothers, he pictured this guy would always be the guy, and he was a small, round, roly-poly guy with a black suit, black tie, white shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Could have been 100 degrees below zero, and he never had a coat, never had a hat. But anyway, when he came in, one of the first things he did was he traded a lot of the guys from the 1960 team, and McDonald was one of them. He traded him to the Cowboys for a kicker and 2 two players. One guy was an offensive guard. One guy was a defensive tackle who infrequently played.
Yeah, what a D-bag.
Yeah, and then
That's sorry.
and then what happened was he went there, and then he played well for the Rams one year, and then what happened was the Rams then the Cowboys, and the Cowboys drafted Bobby Hayes, who won the gold medal in the 1964 Olympics that year. It was 100 yards, 100 meter dash. He was the fastest man in the world. So then they traded him to the Rams, and then he had 2 more Pro Bowl years, and was comeback player of the year. And
well, here's 2 notes here that I find absolutely fascinating. First off, finally got elected to the NFL Hall of Fame in 1998. I mean, that was from the Veterans Committee, correct?
Right.
I think Ray Dininger had a lot to do with that, right?
Ray Dininger had everything to do with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
he was working on that for years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
because because as a member of the press, he had the right to vote.
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure Tommy McDonald was had at the he received his award at the Hall of Fame. I'm pretty sure that he had Ray Dininger introduce him.
Oh, he did, yeah.
And I'm sure he probably had Ray write
A speech for him.
Yeah.
at least some of the speech. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
here, just to move on from Tommy McDonald real quick. 2 really interesting notes that I find here. First off, 5'9", 172 pounds, shortest player ever inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and really fascinating. The great, arguably the greatest coach of all time. I mean, people could say it's Lombardi or Belichick, but Lombardi says, if I had 11 Tommy McDonalds, I'd win the championship every year. And that tells you about.
That tells you everything.
That tells you everything right there. I mean, that's the GOAT coach basically saying, hey, if I had 11 guys like you, we would win the
And
championship
this, you
every
got to
year.
remember, this is a whole different game. This is a game where, you got a wide receiver came off the line of scrimmage, and he got hit right away. He could go across the middle, and a guy could elbow him in the head. I mean, what the old Raiders in the 70s used to do. Then they changed the rules in the late 70s, to protect the wide receivers. But I mean, this guy was a tough guy. He played during a very, very violent era, and deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. And like I said, I watched that Cooper Cup in the Super Bowl, and for some reason, I just saw him.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I remember as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
That small, elusive guy who caught everything, and
Yeah.
nobody could cover him. I mean, that's how great he was.
Yeah, let me give a shout out my buddy Sean Kilrain. What's up, Sean? How you doing? Sean's with me on the Sully Squad, and also he does a college football show on Wednesday nights. And me, as you guys know, me and Sean go way back. Sean
Sure.
loves his football, man, and he I know he knows a lot about Eagles wide receivers. So, all right, so let's move on. We got here's another old day receiver, Pete Retzlaff. Now, Pete Retzlaff, born August 21st, 1931. He played running back at South Dakota State. Wow, it's amazing because now the draft is 7 rounds, so 22nd round. I mean, Christ, that'd be that's like undrafted free agent times like a million.
Exactly.
22nd round. You figure 22nd round times however many teams there were. That's a lot of players.
Well, actually, there wasn't that many teams back then.
Well, that's true, but
and this was before the AFL.
but even if there's only like 15 teams, 22 rounds, it's still a lot of players.
Oh, you better believe it.
Yeah. This guy served in the U.S. Army for 2 years. He was cut by the Lions and picked up by the Eagles. So if that's the case, he probably has to go down as a top 10 free agent, undrafted, free agent type pickup from nowhere.
Of course. Definitely. I mean, especially when you look at what he did here. His career was amazing here. He retired his number. He's a member of the Eagles Hall of Fame. Played 5 Pro Bowls, first team All-Pro twice, second team All-Pro twice. He was on the 60 championship team. He led the league with receptions in 1958. In 1965, he won the Burt Bell Player of the Year award. Now, he started back then. Guys, who were other people that won the Burt Bell Player of the Year award back then? John Unitas, Jim Brown, I think Paul Hornung. I mean, we're talking, these are Hall of Fame guys, all right? Yeah. So, and then when he retired from the game, he established the Players Association. He was the president. Not only that, then after that, he was the Eagles VP and the general manager for in the late '60s, early '70s.
Yeah, I was gonna say you have it right here, 69 to 72, Eagles VP and GM. And here's one, because this guy was very, very instrumental in the players union, helped establish the NFL Players Association, and was president on 2 separate occasions.
So smart guy.
Yeah, and I like this little tidbit where you say he was asked to be the Marlboro Man.
Yeah, well, Pete Retzlaff worked with my Uncle Marcel, Roger's father.
Yeah, he was a board member of the bank my father was at.
Yeah.
And
my Uncle Marcel was president of a bank, and he was on the Pete Retzlaff was a member on the board, and you've met him numerous times.
That's how I found out through my father
about being a Marlboro Man.
Yeah, and this obviously goes back to probably right around 64-ish, 65. Yeah. He was a handsome man, as most people would say, blonde hair and always looked tan. Obviously, he was cut.
Right.
To give it if you're an old head, you'll know this. Years ago, in the 70s, 60s, 70s, they used to have a billboard down around 95 and Girard, and it was the Marlboro Man sign.
Okay.
And you would listen to KYW, and the KYW went in and they did the traffic, and you would say you were leaving your house and you were at Woodhaven. The guy would sit there and say, yeah, the traffic's backed up from Woodhaven to the Marlboro Man. You'd say, oh, Christ, you're in a long line of traffic, right?
It was a landmark.
It was a landmark. But one of the original Marlboro Man was a guy by the name of Charlie Connerly. He was an All-American quarterback in the late 40s, came from the University of Mississippi. Then he played on the Giants, on these great Giants teams in the 50s with Frank Gifford and Pat Summerall and Kyle Rote and those types of guys before he was the quarterback before Wyatt Tittle. But anyway, he was the Marlboro Man. And he picture Willie Nelson, but not real long hair, but that kind of scraggly skin, But this guy, Pete Retzlaff, like Roger said, I mean, this guy was right out of Central Casting. If you were making a movie and you wanted a guy to be the president of the United States, if you wanted this guy to be the biggest stud in Hollywood, this is Pete Retzlaff. He's your guy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and he was asked, but he declined because it coincided, like I said, it was either 64 or 65 with the Surgeon General coming out. And
64 is when the Surgeon General came out and said
that cigarette smoking was hazardous to your health.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like straight up Mad Men stuff. Anybody out there watch the movie Mad Men? That was a great movie. All those ad guys and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
If you ever saw the person that did get the after he refused him, and the guy that they wound up using, very similar features to Pete Retzlaff, so they kept that.
Yeah,
they kept that profile.
I think even I think maybe even Tom Selleck did that at one time before he was on. I don't remember, but I mean,
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I know he did for one of those cigarette things, but anyhow,
we digress.
Yeah, we digress.
All right, and so just to wrap him up, for any old heads out there, you have a question on here for any listener who saw Pete Retzlaff. Do you believe he should be in the NFL Hall of Fame? So anyway, that's a question we have. But moving on here, you got another guy here. Number 3, you have a guy by the name of Ben Hawkins. Played for the Philadelphia Eagles from 1966 to played in the league from 1966 to 1973. Wore number 18. He was 6'2", 190. Nickname was the Hawk. Known for not bucking up his chin strap while playing. He was one of the NFL's original diva receivers, correct? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. He was like light years ahead of
Billy White Shoes Johnson.
Yeah, like Ocho Cinco and Terrell Owens, but he wasn't. He had the attitude, but it wasn't as aggressive as it was years later.
Mm-hmm.
But he drove an Aston Martin, lived down in Society Hill. Aston Martin, that's the James Bond car, and he was always trying to show up other people and other players. And
that sounds like Antonio Brown a little bit,
yeah,
except not as crazy.
And the other teams hated him. And
ego he was not short of.
No, other teams hated to play against, hated them, and they would do anything they could. They would literally, and this was back then, where you could take a guy and you could hit him across the helmet.
Yeah.
And so when he came across the middle, especially one time he came across the middle, caught a pass, and guy, I think it was Mel Renfro or somebody on the Cowboys, clipped the top of his helmet, but he ducked a little bit. The helmet fell off, and he ran all the way into the end zone with his big afro. This was down at Franklin Field, and but people always were trying to take cheap shots on him because he was always braggadocious, like and but he was a good player, and never made the Pro Bowl, never. And I can remember he was a big fan favorite here, even though we had some bad teams. I think that's probably why.
He definitely belongs in what we have compiled here as one of the Eagles' top receivers. I remember watching him play, and he was always my first or second favorite player.
Well, he was a stud back then, yeah.
Him and Timmy Brown.
Yeah, oh yeah, Timmy Brown, yeah.
And yeah, like you said, it looks like he played on some shitty teams, but his best season, 1967, 59 catches, 1265, 21.4 yards per catch, 10 touchdowns, 90 yards per game average. Now, for back then, that's really good. And then led NFL in reception yards and yards per game.
And he's playing with Norm Snead. If any of you guys are older heads or know Eagles history, I mean, Norm Snead was the quarterback back then. So, I mean, it's not like he had Sonny Jurgensen throwing to him or Don Meredith or John Brody or Roman Gabriel, one of those guys. I mean, Bart Starr, exactly. Unitas. He had Norm Snead, which he wasn't a bad quarterback, but he was serviceable, but he wasn't in the elite league. Would have been interesting to see what he would have done had he played with an elite quarterback. Like, here's a question that I came up with when I was researching him. See, back then they had the draft. You were drafted in the NFL and the AFL, and he had been drafted with the Jets by the Jets in the AFL at the same year. What year would that have been when he came out?
It was 19. Hang on, you have it right here. It was 1966.
Oh, 66. When Namath was the quarterback. Now, the Jets won the NFL championship 68, won the Super Bowl in 69. Now, if he had gone to the Jets' two primary receivers was a guy named Don Maynard, right? And he was old because he played with the Giants in the 50s. And then he had another guy named George Sauer. And these guys weren't nearly as good as him.
Oh, yeah.
And Namath, in one of the years, 67, I think it was, he threw for 4,007 yards. He was the first guy to ever throw in 14 games. And this was when football was a running game. So I posed the question, how do you think his career would have fared if he played with Namath when Namath was at the peak of his career?
Can you imagine those two together?
In New York?
Oh, my God.
You talk about egos.
Especially if he was the first diva receiver, because
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, New York would have loved him. They would have been in like Studio 54, all that.
Nobody would have seen either one of them till Sunday morning in the locker room, because they would have been out on the town the previous 6 nights.
Oh yeah, partying.
Well,
Well,
it would have been like that famous George Parcells, or no, I think it was George Parcells and Bill Belichick, where they talk about LT, and they were saying how, like, another player, LT used to fall asleep in the film room.
Yeah. And
another player, they go up and cut him or whatever, and they're like, "What do you do with LT?" They're like, "Oh, you let him sleep because he makes plays on Sunday."
That's right.
Hey, that's how it is. I mean, if you perform on that field, it doesn't matter what the hell you're doing out there.
There was a guy to talk about. This is just an aside. This in the 50s when Paul Brown coached the Cleveland Browns, and these were great teams. They won like 3-4 championships. There was a guy that played defensive end, and he's in the Hall of Fame. His name was Doug Atkins, and this guy was like a bear. His shoulders were like from here to the end of the couch, and he was a monster. They were in a summer camp watching film, and he farted in the meeting. And Paul Brown traded him. He traded him. Can you imagine? Now this guy was all pro, first team all pro. I mean, some of these older guys, they didn't tolerate any shit,
Yeah, but Yeah. So anyway, so we're getting now we're getting up to, we're almost to 1970 here. Real quick, I got my man Sean with a comment here. He says Mike Quick was one hell of a wideout. I remember him making that behind the back catch. Oh yeah, we're going to be getting to Mike Quick definitely. And yeah, Mike Quick used to be the king of the one-hand catch too. Mike Quick used to have a lot of one-hand catches. I remember when I was a kid.
Phenomenal.
So, all right. So now we come up to Harold Jackson. Harold Jackson played 69 to 72. He played at Jackson State University in Jackson, Mississippi. Former Jackson State, for a small school, boy, they had a lot of great NFL players. You got Walter Payton, and you got Jimmy Smith. I think Wilbur Montgomery went to Abilene Christian.
That's right. That's right.
So he was 5'10", 175, so he wasn't the biggest guy. Nicknamed the Road Runner.
Around 9,300, which back then he was probably arguably the fastest guy in the league after Bob Hayes. And he came into he was a 12th round pick from the Rams, and then when he came with us, he made 2 Pro Bowls right away, and out of 3 years. And I led the league in receiving, receptions, made second team All Pro in 72. Then he went. We had a coach in here in 73. His name was Mike McCormick. He used to be on the staff of Washington when Washington was coached by George Allen, and at Washington they went to the Super Bowl in 1972. They lost to Miami 14-7. If you remember that game, that's the game where you're premiering with the field goal kicker. You know, you always see it on ESPN.
NFL bloopers and stuff too.
You know, the kick was fumbling. You know, the holder fumbled it or something, and he had the ball and he tried to pass it, and then Mike Bass picked it off and ran it in for a touchdown. But anyway, Mike McCormick was he's in the NFL Hall of Fame as a player, and he played with the Browns and played for Paul Brown. But anyway, when he got into coaching, he coached with George Allen, and back then George Allen did not like rookies. He traded all his draft players to get veterans. So when McCormick got his first head coaching job in the NFL, he did the same thing. He wanted veterans. He didn't want young guys around. So that's what he did. He 73. He came and he traded Jackson for Roman Gabriel. And if you remember Roman Gabriel that one year, that was, he was the Messiah. You remember? Mm-hmm. That was amazing season. Yeah.
You have a note here. He was third in the MVP voting in 1975, third in the MVP voting behind O.J. Simpson and John Hadle.
Oh yeah.
Well, John Hadle was his quarterback, so he's part of the reason why he put up all those numbers.
Yeah.
It looks like he retired in 1983 with 579 receptions, 10,372 yards, and 76 touchdowns. He led the decade of the 70s in every major receiving category, up against fellow.
Stop and think about the guys that he was up against: Fred Biletnikoff, Cliff Branch, Mel Gray, John Gilliam, Isaac Curtis, Lynn Swan, John Stallworth, Charlie Joyner, Drew Pearson. Just about all those guys are in the Hall of Fame, but a couple of them aren't. But Harold Jackson isn't, and I honestly believe he should be in there. And when I was putting this together, I wanted to pose a question. I don't know if people want to write in an answer. I said this is what I was thinking. Although Gabriel came here, he led the league in passing and made the Pro Bowl in 73. That was the first of 5 seasons with the Eagles. The question is, was the trade worth it for Jackson? Worth it? Gabriel was 33 at the time, and he was after the trade, and his career was seriously on the decline after 73. Jackson at 26, he ran a 9,300, was one of the elite receivers in the NFL, and he had 4 more Pro Bowl seasons ahead of him. So it begs the question: did the Eagles make a mistake there? I submit to you they did.
Sure, yeah, because if you're only getting a year or two out of a guy, and you were and the team wasn't ready for a Super Bowl, so if you're not ready, the only way you can make that argument is if it's modern day and you're getting Tom Brady and he's getting you a Super Bowl or 2. Then you say it's worth it.
I don't think, as I remember, I could be wrong. I don't think Roman Gabriel was jumping for joy to be traded from Los Angeles to Philadelphia either.
Oh no, you don't want.
He was another one that was in the kind of in the Joe Namath mold where,
Oh yeah, well he was on.
So does Oates wherever he could, and
he did. He was a big guy, good looking guy. He was in Los Angeles, so he did a lot of television. He was on Gilligan's Island. There's an episode of him on Gilligan's Island. I remember that one. He was in movies. He did some spit parts in movies. So he had a good life.
He was not.
And next thing you know, he's coming to Philadelphia, which was back in the early 70s was like going to the
like Siberia.
like a Siberia. I mean, who wants to play here? And he had a great season in the first year, and then that was it. But I mean, we got rid of Jackson, and Jackson just continued to keep playing and became the dominant wide receivers stat man in the 1970s for the entire decade, at the head of all those Hall of Famers that I mentioned. So
even the head of this next guy right here, Harold Carmichael, played for the Eagles 1971 to 1983. I'm going to break down Harold Carmichael real quick, but since we were just talking about Harold Jackson, I'll ask your question out there. It says from a statistical standpoint, as you said, Harold Jackson was the NFL's best receiver throughout the 70s, yet he is not in the Hall of Fame. If anybody's curious or wants to know, can you make an argument as to why Carmichael was inducted in the Hall of Fame and Jackson is not?
yeah,
Anyway, but not to slight Carmichael. Carmichael's an all-time Eagles great receiver. Played his what was he, 6'7"?
Yeah.
All right, so one of the tallest receivers in National Football League history.
Right.
He played his college ball at Southern University in Louisiana. He was the thing that's really remarkable about a lot of these guys is none of them are really high draft picks. You know, like you stop and think, like you look at like a lot of the modern day receivers. Like, yes, there's some that aren't high draft picks. Of course, there's always are.
Well, you have to remember too, back then, a lot of these guys are getting picked in the late 60s or 70s, and they were playing predominantly at black schools or black programs because they didn't. A lot of the schools, especially the SEC schools,
But they didn't throw the ball.
They didn't integrate until much later. I don't think Alabama integrated until 68, 69, somewhere that neighborhood. So, so a lot of these guys had to go to the historically black colleges and universities. I mean, Grambling was always a football power. Jackson State was always a football power. Now you don't even hear of guys going to Grambling. There's not anybody that plays at Grambling that's in the pros. Years ago, there was a ton of them.
I'm guessing that Harold Jackson didn't have a load of support behind him, you know, recommending.
Yeah.
Probably because of his attitude, like
Probably
you said.
because of the attitude. And, you know, the thing that strikes me is that Harold Carmichael, yes, in the Hall of Fame, 50 years after he started playing football.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he was the consummate team player. He was always he was a humble guy.
and he stayed with the
He
organization.
stayed with the organization. He's very loyal.
He's still there.
Yeah, he's still there.
Here's my man Mike Laura. What's up, Mike? How you doing? Mike says, "Welcome back, old school. Hello, boys." You check Mike out on Sunday mornings at 9 with Pat on PM and the AM. He also does the college football show with me on Wednesday nights, and Thursday nights he does on the Out of Box Network is Mike's Locker Room. It's really good. So check him out. What's up, Mike? How are you? So, all right. So we look at Harold Carmichael. Harold Carmichael, you know, like I said, I'm not trying to slight Harold Carmichael
not
because
at
he was
all.
a great player. 4 Pro Bowls, 73, 78, 79, and 80. Set the club record by playing 162 consecutive games from 73 to 1982. 1979, second team All NFL, sixth in NFL, sixth in league MVP voting. Selected to league's second all-time team of the 70s. He's a member of the Eagles Hall of Fame, and he was selected in the NFL Hall of Fame in 2020. His number's yet to be retired.
Yeah, that's a disgrace.
Well, obviously we knew that because Alshon Jeffrey wore it.
Yeah, that's a disgrace.
And here's another interesting tidbit because Tommy McDonald and Harold Carmichael both finished their careers with Dallas.
Yeah.
That just doesn't seem right.
Yeah, they both played there. And another thing, well, actually, McDonald finished his with the Rams.
Oh, okay, but
But he went to the Dallas. But the one thing, if anybody was old enough to remember, the first 2 years Carmichael played here, he always had a case of the dropsies. He would go across the middle, ball would be right in his hands, and he would make a lot of drops. And people would boo the shit out of him. Oh, I don't know if I could say that, but I said
no,
it
yeah,
anyway.
it's fine.
Yeah, but people would boo the shit out of him. I mean, he had a tough time his first 2 years. And like I said, 73 when Gabriel came, that's when he started really playing some football. And like I said, 73 led the league in receptions, yards per game. I mean, he guy was a stud. You know.
Yeah, and then just to top Harold Carmichael off, like you said, he went back to the Eagles, returned to the Eagles in 1998 as director of player development and alumni relations. So, Harold Carmichael's one of those guys. He's a career Eagle, and
Oh, I'm sorry.
and I think if you not to speak for him, but if you ask Dick Vermeil, he probably would tell you Harold Carmichael was one of his core guys to get his program off the boat.
Oh, definitely.
Because
when Coach Vermeil came in, I mean, there was a lot of guys that you remember they had. It was before him. Maybe it was even before Coach Vermeil was Don Zimmerman, Poe James. When Coach Vermeil first came in, one of the first things he said was, "I don't want any of my guys going into the end zone when they score a touchdown and spinning the ball." And some of those guys did that, like Poe James, those guys. So when Coach Vermeil came, he got rid of all, I guess, what.
The Eagles weren't setting the world on fire when Vermeil came in '76.
Oh yeah.
He did what most of the good coaches do in their first summer camp.
They laid a wall down,
and with the intent of, they knew the guys who were in their target.
Yeah.
And they just did the same thing.
Yeah.
You worked them to death. They weren't used to it.
Yeah.
And it's sayonara.
It's just good. And what's fascinating, I mean, and everybody's seen the movie Invincible. When Coach Vermeil first came, they actually had an open tryout then at the vet. People were coming from all over to go. I mean, who does that? It just goes to show how bad that team was.
Yeah.
I had season tickets back then, and it was painful. I mean, I was in the 700 level. I was just hammered all the time. But, I was a proud member of the 700 level.
You had to be hammered to watch that bullshit.
The Eagles were a bad team for the previous 10 to 12 years.
Oh yeah, they couldn't. Yeah, exactly.
After 1960,
61 was their last really good team.
Right, and when you say that they were bad, they were as bad as it gets.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. One year we were one game away from having O.J. Simpson and the winning the draft in '68.
Yeah,
the '69 draft. I was at that game.
Grandpop said they messed it up. That was the
that was the snowball.
That was Snowball and Santa Claus.
There was Snowball and Santa Claus. We beat the Vikings, and there were Snowball and Santa Claus. I was at the game, the previous game before. I think it was the Cowboys game, because I wrote an article and had it published about this. I was a kid, and they had to flying the plane. They were playing Dallas, and Dallas kicked their ass. And a group of fans hired a plane and put a sign on it, flying all around Franklin Field, saying "Joe must go." And when you went into the stadium, they were giving out these bumper stickers for the car, "Joe must go." And I had my dad got us, me and my brother's Foot Lockers when we were kids. Like we were like, at this time I'm 12 maybe. He used to put stuff in it, because he was in a GI. He was in the Korean War, and he was a combat soldier and stuff. So those guys do that. So I had it on my I put it on there. In fact, my Foot Locker it's in my brother's house, and I still have that sign on it.
How about that?
That's
Joe must go. I mean, I'm telling you, people put them on their cars. I mean, it was like they wanted to get rid of this guy that looked like
the airplane. You generally only see them where if you look down the shore at the beach.
Oh yeah,
restaurants will have it, and they're pulling the whatever saying that they want or advertisement that they want.
Yeah, Copper Tone used to be big for that.
Copper Tone, yeah.
A couple of years ago, actually.
Edith Joe's.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, somebody actually rented a billboard in Jersey, said "Fire Harry Roseman." So I mean, this isn't new.
Well, Philadelphia fans are a different breed, and I know you're not the biggest Howie Roseman fan out there, but I mean, hey, 8-0. I mean, got to give the guy some credit.
No, you got to give him some props. I agree. He really, but I mean, we sat through some bad things that we didn't have to,
Yeah, and by the way, and since you brought up veterans, happy Veterans Day to any veteran out there that's watching. Happy Veterans Day, and thanks for your service.
Yeah.
All right, so now we move on to number 6 here. With our first tight end by the name of Charlie Young. Charlie Young, 6'4", he played for the Eagles 1973, 1976. 6'4", 234, went to University of Southern California. Now here's our first high draft pick. This guy was 1972 consensus All-American, first round selection, number 6 overall in the 1973 draft. He was also one of the NFL's original diva receivers. Okay.
Yeah, it was like this guy was like a super diva. This guy. So this is when so now it's he's a couple years after the Hawk, Ben Hawkins. So now it's starting to get a little more. It's starting to metastasize a little more. But anyway, just to give you an idea, the day he's drafted, just to give you the idea about this guy, his attitude, they said in his conference call with all the Philadelphia writers like Ray Didinger and Stan Hockman and all those guys, he says to them, he says, "I've got the best pass catching hands in the world. I can't say who the best tight end in the NFL will be because I haven't gotten there yet, but I will be the best." And then this is a quote that he said, and I'm reading this from a book here. "I knew what I was doing the whole time," talking about himself. "I knew what I was doing the whole time about marketing himself. I knew I was a quality product. So all I was doing was advertising. Sony advertises, General Motors advertises. What was wrong with me advertising? The average playing career lasts 4.5 years. What was I supposed to do? Wait 3 years to make a name for myself? That way I'd only have 1.5 years to cash in. So I talked a lot. I think people misunderstood me in the beginning. They called me arrogant and braggadocious. I could tell some of the veterans didn't like me, but I didn't care. I knew I could back up everything I said." So I mean, this guy was he really put a lot of people off, as like he said, the veterans, because a lot of guys, it's a whole different league back then.
Right.
Whole different.
It's a whole different culture.
Yeah,
Because when you look at the dates, 73, 74, 75, I'm thinking of Shaft and
Exactly.
all that timing, and which is which is fine. You go through cycles
Black
like that.
exploitation films.
Right.
Pam Grier. They used to show them in the Pam Grier. Fred Williamson used to play for the Chiefs. See if he got into those movies. Jim Brown.
Yep.
Yeah. But anyway, this guy had a real attitude. But when he came here,
I was going to say, it looks like he backed it up. 1973, first team All-Pro tight end, UPI Rookie of the Year. 74 and 75, second team All-Pro selections. Yearly breakdown: 73, 55 catches, 854, 6 TDs. 74, 63 catches, 696, 3 TDs. 75, 49 for 659, 3 touchdowns. 1976, Vermeil becomes head coach. He goes down to 30 receptions, 374, no touchdowns. I'm assuming maybe that's because Vermeil was more about the running game. Is that correct?
Yeah, he had Tom Sullivan as one of the runners, and we're going to do a show about next year on who we select as probably the Eagles' top 10 rushers of all time. And not only that, he had a quarterback by the name of Mike Barella, who was, he actually made the Pro Bowl one year. He only played 5 games, but they nominated him to the Pro Bowl. But and they just didn't have, it was Vermeil's first year. I think they only won 4 games.
Yeah, and Dick Vermeil, the Eagles definitely emphasized the run.
Yeah,
and I can remember,
big time.
I can remember him being criticized to no end because year in, year out, he stuck with his offense, and it did not include, a real emphasis on passing.
Oh yeah, they didn't light it up back then.
He was
most
harshly criticized, and people hated watching the running game. So it's going full circle.
Yeah.
Now, granted, we have 3 great receivers today, but for the last 2 or 3 seasons, we've really done well with the running game.
Well, I think a lot of it also goes back to the rules back then. You have to remember back in the 70s, wide receiver could line up, a defensive back could line up right in front of a receiver and just take them run right at the line of scrimmage. And in 78, I believe it was, or 77, they called it the Blunt rule. Mel Blunt.
Yeah.
He was a Hall of Fame cornerback for the Steelers. Guy was like 6'3", he was like 200 some. He could run like a deer, and he was physical. And basically, I mean, he would just push these guys around. All the cornerbacks were doing it.
Yeah, hugged them.
Oh yeah. Offensive linemen before 1978, they weren't allowed to extend their hands like they are today. They have to keep them within the shoulders. But back then, they had to keep their hands in here So if they did get, an experienced lineman could sit and get his hand in here and maybe get a grasp and get a hold. But I mean, they watched a lot of that stuff. I mean, they weren't allowed to extend like this now. So I mean, and they made these rules change to protect the wide receivers because after what happened to Stingley, right? Darryl Stingley paralyzed in a chair because of the Tatum hit.
And to add more offense to the game.
And add more offense to the game because in the late 70s, I mean, teams were running the ball all the time, like you said, Raj. Everybody was running.
Yeah.
You look at statistics from back then. Every team had a fullback that had over 1,000 yards or close to it.
Yeah. Now the fullback position's been practically eliminated.
It's pretty much extinct.
Yeah, he's just another blocker.
Yeah, fullback's almost like T-Rex, Astra.
But by the same token, the great middle linebackers are extinct. I mean, back then you had these great big fullback runners like I said in the 70s, you had John Riggins and Larry Zonka, right? And earlier than that, you had Jim Brown and Jim Taylor, and you had a guy by the name of Dick Bass that played for the Rams. I mean, these guys were big fullbacks and they were tough, 230, 240. And then they always had the great middle linebackers like Butkus and Nitsky and Novus and Berge.
The only team I remember back then, leading up into the 80s, I guess, that was a passing offense was Air Coryell.
He was the only one.
At San Diego.
Yeah, actually, first was the Cardinals with Jim Hart.
Right.
In the 70s. He's the one that started it because I was Coryell, and then when he went to the Chargers, he did the same thing.
Right.
But I mean, he was the only guy.
That was it.
That was it.
And
everybody else was doing. I mean, everybody else was running the ball.
The running game was substantiated by the teams that won the Super Bowl. He never won the Super Bowl.
Exactly. It's a copycat league. Look at the Houston Oilers. I mean, you remember the House of Pain game. I mean, that offense every year lit it up. They had one back, 3 receivers.
Four receivers, actually. It was run and shoot.
It was run and shoot. 4 receivers. They had 2 of their offensive linemen, I believe, are in the Hall of Fame. I mean, they had Moon. I mean, fabulous team, and yet they're doing the same thing that offenses are doing today, yet they could not win. They couldn't win playoff games.
Yeah, so just to touch up Charlie Young here, because we're going to move on here. Interesting, Charlie Young was traded to LA Rams for Ron Jaworski. So that turned out to be, as good as Charlie Young was, that turned out to be a great trade, obviously.
Yeah. Gets
Jaws here, and of course Jaws is still a fixture in Philadelphia as he's on Eagles post-game show. And Jaworski got us to Super Bowl 15. Great career here, and tough as a son of a bitch, too.
You better believe it.
Charlie Young, touch him off here. He played for the 49ers in the Super Bowl, 1981. He started on that Super Bowl team. And one quick question for anybody out there. For anyone who remembers seeing Charlie Young play for the Eagles, do you think he could have had a Hall of Fame career if he had not been such a diva?
I mean, you stop and think about it. When we traded him to Jaworski, we traded him to the Rams. He played there 3 years. He had a total of 36 catches in 3 years. He played for a team, like Raj said, back then everything was running.
Yeah, ground Chuck Knox.
So Chuck Knox, ground Chuck. And the Rams were a playoff team every year back then, and they ran the ball. They had a back by the name of Lawrence McCutcheon, who was a stud back. I think even earlier than that, they had a guy named Wes Josephson. They had a number of really good backs. But, I mean, here's a guy who arguably could have been a Pro Bowl tight end every year. I mean, if he just sits there and maybe negotiates the contract, or maybe he sits there and he negotiates to go to a better team or a different team, his whole career is different.
Yeah, so now we come up to a little bit more modern day. We come up to Mike Quick. Sean already made a comment about Mike Quick. Mike Quick, 1982 to 1990, number 82. He played at North Carolina State. He was selected by the Eagles in the first round in 1982 draft, 20th picked overall. The Eagles wanted to select a wide receiver from Clemson by the name of Perry Tuttle. That's one thing about Vermeil. Vermeil wasn't the greatest drafter. Grandpa always said Vermeil's drafts weren't the greatest.
Right.
And thank God, sometimes in the NFL, sometimes in the draft you get more lucky than you are good, because
Buffalo had Tuttle.
Had Tuttle been there, the Eagles would have taken Tuttle, and Mike Quick would have never been an Eagle. So career highlights: 5 Pro Bowls, 1983 to 1987. two-time NFL All-First Team All-Pro, 1983 and 85. He's a member of the Eagles Hall of Fame. 1982 strike shortened season, 10 catches, 156, 1 touchdown. Really came on in his second year in 1983 at 69 catches, 1409, 13 TDs. And then, of course, the rest of the year, after that, 83 killed it. He had 13. He had, 84 he killed it. He had 9 touchdowns. 85 he had 11 touchdowns, including a 99-yard touchdown from Jaws in a November game against Atlanta, which won a game in overtime.
Yeah.
So one thing that hurt Quick was Quick got hurt in 1988. He played in only, and from that point on, he played in only 18 of the 48 regular season games due to injury, quad and patella. Yeah. Made many great acrobatic catches, as Sean pointed out earlier.
Yeah, I think that's what people. I think it's what people remember. I mean,
well, Mike Lauro in particular, Quick was a bad man. He was at that Atlanta game in 1985. So yeah, Mike's right around my age, so he must have been a little kid, because I was I was 7. I think Mike's got me by a year or 2, so he was right around my Joey's age.
And Quick, when he had 5 Pro Bowl seasons, he led the NFL in TD receptions and was second in yards behind Hall of Famers Lofton and Steve Largent. But Buddy Ryan once said, "I wouldn't trade Quick for any of those guys, Lofton and Largent." He said, "For my money, he's the best receiver in football." And I think that what he said is right. He was a humble guy. He was a hell of a football player. One thing I found fascinating that I didn't know when I was doing research on him was that when he was 18 years old, he was a world-class hurdler. Now that's really impressive.
Yeah.
Robert Griffin, the RG3, is a world-class hurdler. I mean, that's a grueling event in track and field.
Yeah. So Quick.
I was going to say, as a side note, what I always will remember with Mike Quick, when he retired, and they had I guess it was halftime or maybe before the game acknowledgement. This is when the owner was Norman Brayman.
Oh,
yeah.
Brayman, yeah.
He awarded him with a golf bag. I'm not talking about clubs, just a golf bag.
Another member of the D-bag crew. He might be a number 1 seed also.
No, Brayman's definitely in the discussions for next week. I can assure you that guy was D-bag.
I was embarrassed as a Philadelphia.
You embarrassed for Quick, that somebody would, somebody as great as he was. I mean,
it wasn't
something. Give him a golf bag? Were you kidding?
It wasn't even like everybody's seen a pro golfer's golf bag with it. Embroidering, and they're huge. This was like something he walked into Kmart.
What a douchebag.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
What a D-bag.
Exactly. Hey, tune in 2 weeks for that show.
But the funny thing is, though, Mike Quick's such a good guy. He probably was like, whatever, and took it in stride, and he's active in all kinds of charities through Delaware Valley.
If I'm not mistaken, I think the fans actually booed.
I'm sure
the golf bag.
Yeah,
I'm sure they did.
But then stop and think about it. Look at that team, that all those guys that we had, and then all of a sudden everybody said, "See ya." Why? Because they didn't want to play for the guy like Brayman that owned the team.
Well, you know what?
He made the guys pay for their own socks. Who does that?
And to
you know what I mean?
Yeah, and to tie up Mike Quick here, Mike Quick said on him. First off, obviously everybody can see Mike Quick. He works with Merrill Reese. He's been there since 1998, color analyst. And real quick to tie him up, he says on how to beat the competition: know their strengths and weaknesses, and understand your own personal skill set. And that's, if you're given any position, but especially a wide receiver in particular, that's what you need. A wide receiver's got to figure out how to get off a bump and run coverage. You got to beat his zone. You got to figure all that stuff out.
I think honestly that if he had another, say, 4 injury-free seasons, he definitely would be a Hall of Famer. He definitely would be a Hall of Famer. He just like Largent and Lofton.
And he wasn't a burner to begin with.
Yeah, he ran a 4.640. Tuttle.
Nobody caught him though.
But
just like Jerry Rice.
And he was
Jerry Rice ran a 4.640.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
But the thing about Rice was he was so well conditioned at the end of a game that nobody could get him. Even that guy on Washington, that corner that was
Darrell Green.
Green was the fastest guy in the league. But I mean, he
Yeah,
would
once
outrun.
he got it, his yards after catch were phenomenal.
Yeah.
You know what? To bring up your point about Norman Brayman too, because we're in my childhood era now of football. Because our next guy is Keith Jackson, our second tight end. Well, the thing that really pisses me off, not can you imagine if Jeff Lurie was the owner back then? Because Jeff Lurie, you could say people could say what they want about Jeff Lurie, but Jeff Lurie gives his guys what they need to succeed.
Exactly.
So if Jeff Lurie was here back when Reggie was leaving, first Reggie would have never left. Keith Jackson would have never left. Byers, Seth Joyner, all them dudes would have been here, or he would have signed them. Maybe they would have re-signed them, and then they would have traded them before they lost a step. You know what I'm saying?
Like, not only that, if Lurie was the coach, he would have had a better relationship with Buddy because he would have let Buddy alone.
I'll take it a step further. He never would have hired Buddy Ryan because that doesn't fit his.
Yeah, that's right. That's not.
Well, okay, well that's true, but
he would have never hired Buddy Ryan.
Yeah.
But just say they were here with all that. I mean, only because with all that talent. I mean, with Randall and Reggie.
Say if he inherited him.
And then he was winning.
Right.
Yeah.
If Buddy Ryan had lasted up to the Lurie ownership, who knows? But
yeah.
Hey, like Buddy Ryan said, you got a winner in town. Remember?
The only guy I can think of that Lurie kept or hired that wasn't an unknown was Rhodes.
Yeah.
And he only lasted what, 3 years?
Yeah.
Well, Rhodes was the only defensive coach he hired, and that was only because the Eagles weren't, when he hired Rhodes, the Eagles weren't really that marketable of a franchise. I mean, if you remember, first off, Lurie was a new owner. He was only in his second year as his owner. He inherited Richie Kotex,
Yeah.
Richie Kotex, I remember famous Richie Kotex, 7-2. Oh, I'll reevaluate my situation. And fucking asshole loses 7 games in a row. You know what I mean?
Another D-bag.
So, but anyway, I digress here. But anyway, we move on to Keith Jackson, tight end from let me what was it about? We used to Chris Berman used to say, let me tell you about Keith Jackson. Remember?
Oh yeah.
So Keith Jackson, 6'2", 250, played at Oklahoma, consensus All-American in 86 and 87, selected in the first round, 13th overall, 1988 draft. He played 4 seasons with the Eagles, but they were very impactful. I mean, shoot, I remember 88 in particular. I mean, he killed it. I mean, that was the first Eagles playoff team in 7 years. Buddy Ryan's first playoff team.
Right.
And Keith Jackson had a great year, great career. Now, I don't want to crap on him, but one thing I do remember about Keith Jackson 1988, I hate to say it, he had a huge drop in that Fog Bowl game. But hey, that's one play. I'm not going to kill the guy. But if you guys remember,
sure,
that was huge, man. That was so frustrating because I remember we should have won that damn game.
Sure.
But anyway, 88, he had 81 receptions, 869, 6 touchdowns, most catches ever by a Eagles rookie, and by an Eagles tight end. Second in the Rookie of the Year behind John Stevens, running back in New England. I remember John Stevens.
Yeah, good player.
89, 63 catches, 648, 3 touchdowns, 90, 50 catches, 670, 6 touchdowns, 91, 48, 569, 5 touchdowns. 91, his stats were only down because we didn't have a quarterback. That was when Randall was out.
Right.
So you had like Brad Gable and Jeff Kemp out there throwing. You know what
Exactly.
I mean? Comments made about Keith Jackson during his rookie season. Buddy Ryan, I did not know how long it would take him to master the pro game. I think it took him about 30 minutes.
Yeah, Parcells had a great one here. It says, I can't think of another rookie who has had a greater impact on his team than that kid with the Eagles. I don't even look at him as a rookie. He plays like a veteran already. With his size and hands, he can take over a game. And he did. He took over a game. I mean, he always had good games against Parcells teams back then. Then he went free agent, went to Miami, played the Pro Bowl there for a year. Then he got traded to the Green Bay, made it in the Pro Bowl there. Then he played on the Super Bowl team that defeated New England with Drew Bledsoe. Now, here's the question that I pose. Although he only played 9 seasons in the NFL, do you think that he could have been in a Hall of Fame player? Why or why not? Do you think he had more talent at tight end than Gronk did when Gronk played for New England and Tampa?
I don't know about more talent. I mean, well,
I think
maybe more. I mean, he was faster and stuff. Gronk was just such a beast. You know what I mean?
Gronk was he was a monster.
I mean, Gronk's like a beast. And here's Mike Laura. Mike Laura here. He said Jackson was a stud. I hate Bremen for letting him walk. Exactly right, Mike. We all feel the same way, especially all over our generation.
But I mean, it's interesting because Gronk was a hell of a football player. Please don't misunderstand. I mean, and he's a beast. But I mean, this guy. I mean, yeah, he was playing with Randall, who really was learning how to be a quarterback. He really didn't have the coaching to be. Imagine if he was playing with a guy like.
Imagine if they were playing today.
Dan Fouts or Staubach or Bradshaw or one of those guys. I mean, he's in the Hall of Fame.
Actually, I'll take it one step further. Imagine if Randall and Keith Jackson were playing for Andy Reid. You put Randall and Keith Jackson, if you put them with Andy Reid, the numbers they could have put up would have been unbelievable.
Oh, because of the emphasis on the passing game.
I mean, yeah.
He would have been, and I mean, this, as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, we like to have debate. We're going to next in 2023, we're going to have some nights where we're going to have debates, and we're going to probably invite other people on. And I mean, I would, if somebody said to me, who would you rather have, is Randall or Donovan McNabb? I would take Randall anytime. I think if Randall had the proper coaching playing for Reed,
I would too. I
mean, Randall was just.
I think as good as McNabb was, and you have to say McNabb was the best quarterback because he had the most success.
Oh yeah.
The numbers are there, but yeah, Randall didn't have the coaching. Like Randall was ahead of his time. I mean, if Randall played today, Randall. I mean, but you know what though? A lot of guys today can thank Randall because Randall was a trendsetter. Randall helped change the game.
Randall was somebody that you didn't mind paying to go see.
Yeah.
The guy was unbelievable.
He was fun to watch.
I have an idea for a show for next year. It's going to be guys that have changed sports. And one guy that comes to mind is Randall. And there's other guys in other different sports, and we're going to put the show together.
Number one is Will.
Oh, nobody changed the game more than Will.
Right.
Well, Lawrence Taylor. So I mean, we're going to put a show together like that, and invite your commentary.
Steph Curry. I mean, it's modern day, but I can make the argument nobody changed the NBA other than Wilt Chamberlain. Nobody's changed the NBA more than Steph Curry because him alone almost has turned this into a 3-point shooting league.
That's all it is.
Tiger Woods,
yeah.
Oh yeah. So I mean, we've got some great topics coming down the road. So make sure you tune in.
Sean Kilrain here. He says, I agree, Randall all day. And the tie up Keith Jackson. Jackson was a heck of a tight end. Keith Jackson loved going across the middle. They're on Big Red's team Super Bowl all day. Totally agree, Sean. But let's get into one of Keith Jackson's teammates, Chris Carter. Chris, all he does is catch touchdowns, Carter.
That's right.
Chris Carter, as a pure receiver, Chris Carter, well, now, actually, I would say T.O. Well, you know what? I don't know. If I guess we'll post the question as we end the show. Out of these guys, as far as NFL career, not necessarily Eagles career, but NFL career, who do you think was more impactful, Chris Carter or T.O.? I would say T.O. myself, but Chris Carter is a surefire Hall of Famer.
They're both in the Hall of Fame.
Right. Well, yeah, right. But I'm just saying, I mean, because first off, Chris Carter, he was a great Eagle, but Buddy Ryan saved his life pretty much. But we'll get into that. So, Chris Carter, 1986, 6'3", 202, number 80, 1986 Consensus All-American from Ohio State. The only guy I can remember the Eagles in my life anyway, since I've been watching, getting in the supplemental draft. Fourth round of the 1987 supplemental draft. Number one player taken in the 87 supplemental draft. Reason of the supplemental draft was
he had signed with a contract with an agent when he was a senior, so he wasn't eligible to be in the NFL draft. So they had to have a supplemental draft for guys like that. And Brian Bosworth was in that draft, and everybody knows how that turned out.
Bust.
Yeah.
The classic picture everybody remembers is that Monday night game when Bo Jackson ran over him in the end zone at the goal line. And the Eagles picked him, Chris Carter, because their 84 pick was Kenny Jackson. and he really wasn't performing
Mm-hmm.
up to expectations. He wasn't. Kenny Jackson was not a first round pick. No, not in the least.
So you have Chris Carter's best year, 1989, 45 catches, 605 yards, 11 touchdowns. Released by Buddy in 1990. Buddy's press statement said that he did not have the speed the team needed and was not running his routes correctly. Real reason was Carter was doing too much partying, drink coke. Later, Buddy credited for help save his life.
Yeah. Picked up by the Vikings for $100, 8-time Pro Bowler, 2-time NFL All-Pro, Alan Page Community Award Winner of the Year, Walter Payton Man of the Year, made the Hall of Fame in 1913. Now, here's a question that I have. Now, stop and think about this. If the Eagles had a more offensive-minded coach, say, think of Dan Coryell or Andy Reid, when Carter played in Philly instead of Buddy, who really was not an offensive guy, do you think the Eagles would have been more patient with Carter concerning his substance abuse issues? Do you think they would have allowed him time to get clean, to come back and play ball, knowing the amount of talent he possessed as a receiver?
I do.
I submit to you that, I mean, if that's Don Coryell or Reed, I think Reed definitely, I think, would give the kid a shot. I mean, look at his own kids.
Oh, well, Andy Reid definitely would have, yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think Coryell would have done the same thing. I mean, I just think Buddy was one of those type of guys that, he
didn't place any emphasis on the offense.
No, he didn't.
Right,
He didn't care.
But Buddy was like, yeah, Chris Carter has talent, but we're winning this because of Reggie White, Jerome Brown, Clyde Simmons, and Seth Joyner.
Defense
Exactly.
has to make plays.
Yeah. And, because, I mean, let's face it, look at what we could have done if Randall had a proper quarterback coach.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So now, all right, so we tie up Chris Carter, move on to number 10. One of Buddy Ryan's really good offensive picks, Freddie Barnett, Arkansas State Fred, 1990 to 1995. He was drafted in the third round of the 1990 draft. Actually, they also drafted Calvin Williams that year, but ironically, they took a guy by the name of Mike Bellamy in the second round from Illinois. He turned out to be a bust.
Yeah, he didn't make it. Yeah.
So his nickname was Arkansas Fred. His rookie year, he had 8 touchdowns. His best play was that 95-yard highlight by Randall in Buffalo.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Made the NFL rookie team. He had a few other good years here. He averaged about 60, 70 yards. I think his two best years were 94, 78 catches, 1,127 yards, 5 touchdowns. 95, he had 48 catches, 585 for 5.
And 92, 67 catches, 1,083 yards, 6 TDs, and he made his first and only Pro Bowl.
He also had that big touchdown in the playoff game against the Saints.
That's right.
That Buffalo game, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't that the same game that Cunningham punted the ball like 80-some yards?
No, it was against the Giants in '89.
That was
That was the
I knew
Meadowlands,
it
but
was
yeah.
New York. I didn't remember it was the Giants or Buffalo.
Yeah, you knew it was like a cold and windy day.
Oh, the ground was frozen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It just goes to show how great an athlete he was. I mean, he wasn't the regular punter. It was Telchik was the regular punter, I believe.
I think the punt may have. I could be wrong, but I think it was one of the couple times that Buddy had a punt on third down.
Yeah, and I remember reading when that happened. He went to Buddy and approached Buddy and said, "Let me punt the ball from the end zone." And he said, "Okay." I mean, that's how good he was.
Well, and that's the athlete that Randall was. So Fred Barnett played in Miami under Jimmy 96, 97. 96, he left unrestricted free agent, signed an $8.5 million contract for 5 years. He replaced Irving Fryer, who would join the Eagles. He was released by Coach Jimmy Johnson after 97. The reason was he lost the speed and could no longer get separation. And you have a question here?
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I was wondering aloud when I put this together. How would Arkansas Fred's career fared if he was as a wideout, if he had played for one of the great early 1990s passing teams like the Cowboys, the Niners, Buffalo, or the Houston Oilers? Now, if he was with the Cowboys, he'd be playing with Irvin and Harper. If he was with the 49ers, he'd be playing with Rice and Taylor. If he was with Buffalo, he'd be with Andre Reed and Lofton. And in Houston, he'd be with Haywood, Jeffries, and Gibbons. And the other thing about it too is
You can take it a step further. Imagine if he played with Green Bay with Favre too. You know,
they're all Hall of Fame quarterbacks. You've got
Yeah.
Troy Aikman, Steve Young, and you've got Jim Kelly, and then you move. Yeah.
I mean, he did play with Marino, who was a Hall of Fame quarterback too. But Marino, if you remember, Marino wasn't necessarily the same guy after he tore his Achilles. Remember Marino tore his Achilles?
Yeah.
He wasn't the same player.
No, and then playing for Johnson didn't like throwing the ball like that.
He was never a gazelle back there, and that was like tying a cinder block to his leg.
Oh,
yeah.
And you know, it's as great as Dan Marino was, and he was great, and I'll argue that he could always I'll argue that he could always play in any era, and I still would say that. But it'd be challenging to have a quarterback with Dan Marino nowadays, just because there's so much speed in the league, and they have a statue back there, you know. But then again, Tom Brady plays, so I think
the thing about Marino is he was just like Brady is. His release was just so quick. Yeah. He was like it was laser. It was like a laser.
2 seconds.
Like Namath. Namath was the same way. I mean, Namath couldn't run. Namath couldn't run from here to that table over there. But
Brady's releases.
And Brady's releases rocket. You know, that's the way these guys were. Yeah. They stayed in the pocket.
Sean answered our question. He said, I think he would have flourished because how he ran his routes for sure. Yeah, definitely. And he definitely had the athletic ability. And yeah, Fred Barnett was a hell of a player. And you don't have him on the list here, but honorable mention to Calvin Williams, because Calvin Williams had a really nice career too. And every time I think about Fred Barnett, I think of Calvin Williams because he was a very good complement to Fred Barnett.
Oh, yeah,
Fred Barnett would run the go routes Fred Barnett would run all the routes, but Barnett would be more of a speed guy and do it all. And Calvin Williams was good on like over the middle on slants, and so they were a great combination. But
oh yeah, I agree strongly. But I mean, if had he played with a guy who really was a passing quarterback that really knew offense, because I could explain, Randall just made the shit up as he went along. That's what Buddy wanted.
They used to just draw plays on the ground. They'd be like, all right, snap the ball to Randall. Buddy used to say, what? Randall make me five big plays.
Yeah, that's all.
You know, so
I mean, so imagine if he's playing if he had gone and played with one of those quarterbacks and played with those receivers, he could have been, would have had well, I think he would have had a hell of a lot of, may not have had as many catches, but he would have had a hell of a lot of, would have had a better career. Would have been more of a winner, that's for sure.
Yeah. So now we move on to a local guy, Irving Fryer, played here 96 through 98, number 80. That's a great receiver number. Grew up in Mount Holly, New Jersey. Went to University of Nebraska, consensus team, All-American 1983. Played on a team, lost the championship game at the Orange Bowl to the University of Miami 31-30. Nebraska was ranked number 1 that year. He was the first player. That's interesting to see a receiver picked first in the draft, 1984, New England.
Yeah.
He played 10 years with New England, made the 85 Pro Bowl. He was on that 85 team that got their butt kicked by the Bears.
Right.
Traded to Miami for draft picks in 1993. Played 3 years with Marino's Dolphins until 96. Made 2 Pro Bowls, became a free agent after 95, and signed with the Eagles. Played 3 seasons with the Eagles, 96, 97, 98. Made the Pro Bowl in 96 and 97. 96, he had 88 catches, 1,195 yards, 11 touchdowns. He was their only shining star in the wild card game. Anybody that remembers that wild card game against the 49ers, that game sucked. We lost 14-0, but he had 5 catches for 62 yards.
He was a great receiver.
He really was.
Oh, yeah. And he was a great, when he was younger.
Great athlete. Great
punt returner. Tremendous punt returner when he first came into the league. And in Nebraska, I mean, he was like the ultimate stud. Our quarterback was what? Ty Detmer?
Ty Detmer was 96, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of catches for Ty Detmer, a guy playing with Ty Detmer, 97 too. And then the next year, 98, it drops off to 48 catches because they
Bobby Hoying.
They had Bobby Hoying. Another,
You could add
in the world.
You could have had Jerry Rice, Mike Quick, and Michael Irvin as a 3-set receiver, and playing with Bobby Hoying, they wouldn't have done shit.
That's right.
Finished up his career with he was released after the 98 season. Finished up his career with Washington. Played there for 99 and 2000. I remember him on the Redskins.
Yeah.
Off-field character issues. He missed the 85 championship game against Miami because he was injured. He injured his hand in domestic violence dispute with his wife. 88, he was arrested in New Jersey Turnpike on weapons charges.
Yeah, he had a loaded shotgun, a handgun, and a knife. And after his career, he got convicted in October 2015 in a mortgage fraud scheme with his mother. He got sentenced to 5 years in prison. He served 8 months. Now he's a pastor at a church in Mount Holly. So
here's Sean with an interesting point. He says, after the catch, he was unstoppable. Also, wasn't shy of getting physical. That is a Fryer. Yeah, Fryer was a great Eagle. It's just a shame the teams were just mediocre. But he was a really good Eagle, though.
Yeah, he was good wherever he was.
yeah, he was. He was a good player.
Good with Washington and New England,
Miami. Yeah.
So now we move on to, my opinion, the best of them all.
Drum roll, please.
Terrell Owens, my man, right here. Got my old school TO jersey right here.
This is our last. This is the dirty dozen. This is the last of the dozen.
So Terrell Owens. Now the only thing, first off, I don't know if I've ever seen a more gutty performance in the Super Bowl in my life. I mean, that dude. You could say what you want about Terrell Owens, his attitude. Did he mess up the 05 season? I mean, or I would blame it more on the Eagles management myself. But you're talking about a guy that single-handedly on one freaking leg practically would have been Super Bowl MVP if we had won that football game.
You better believe it.
And he came back in like 3 weeks.
Yeah, he was in that bariatric chamber all the time. Nobody does that.
I mean, if you ever want to, anybody out there advertising hyperbaric oxygen chambers, look up Terrell Owens, and that would be part of a reason to get one or use one, you know. Although, let's keep it real though, one of us being up in there and TO being in there are two totally different things. Because, all right, so Terrell Owens, Terrell El Dorado Owens. In Spanish, El Dorado means a place of fabulous wealth or riches.
That's his middle name, El Dorado.
Isn't that apropos to TO too?
Oh yeah.
All right, 6'3", 225. Drafted in the third round, the 1996 draft. And here's another interesting tidbit. 49ers took him in the third round. He becomes an all-time great. They actually traded up to get J.J. Stokes from UCLA in the first round that year. Now, J.J. Stokes was a nice receiver, but he was no TO, that's for sure.
Definitely.
Played at University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. Played three years on the school's basketball team as a backup. Wore number 81 throughout his career. NFL career highlights: 15-year NFL career, 6 times Pro Bowler, 5 times All NFL first team, NFL 2000s all-time second team. How the hell is he on the second team? Well, maybe Randy Moss
and Rice.
Yeah, but Rice was more than that. Rice was done in the early 2000s, though.
Yeah. T.O. actually replaced Jerry Rice in effect.
Yeah.
Third all-time in touchdowns behind Rice and Moss. Third all-time in receiving yards behind Rice and Larry Fitzgerald. Eagles career highlights. Arrived in 2004 from the Ravens in a 3-team trade. Eagles sent Brandon Whiting to the 49ers in the deal. Played 2 seasons in Philly, 2004, 14 games, 77 catches, 1,200 yards, 14 touchdowns in 14 games. That's unreal. First team All-Pro, tied for second NFL Offensive Player of the Year behind Peyton Manning, and tied with Dante Culpepper. We already touched on this. Place leg and bariatric chamber for several weeks at the end of the season and playoffs, so you could play in the Super Bowl. 9 catches, 122 yards in the Super Bowl, lost it to New England. 2005, played 7 games because of contract dispute. Best remembered for doing sit-ups in the driveway.
Next question.
Yeah.
But even in 05, and even with him and Donovan having that personal issue, 47 catches, 763 for 6 touchdowns in 7 games. That's still, you extrapolate over the career, he's gonna get 14 touchdowns again.
Yeah.
You know? Eagles record fell to 6-10. First time since '99, Eagles don't make the playoffs. Then he goes to Dallas in 2006 to 2008.
That's my quarterback.
Yeah, 2007, first team All-Pro and Pro Bowl, popcorn picture after TD. Played for Buffalo in 2009, played for the Bengals in 2010. Without TO, Eagles records in 2005, 2008 were 2005, 6-10, 2006, 10-6, 2007, 8-8, 2008, 9, 6-1. But we made the championship game that year, and we beat Terrell Owens Cowboys. What was it, 41-6 or something, or 40-6 in that last game of the year?
Yeah.
What's your question?
Now, the question I would pose is, if the Eagles meet T.O.'s salary demands before the 2005 season, okay, say they do that hypothetically, does this team get back to the Super Bowl with T.O., considering they made the playoffs in 06, they lost to the divisional round to the Saints, and in 08 they lost in the championship game to the Arizona? So with T.O. on that team, do they get back?
In a second. In a second. If they have Terrell Owens, maybe not in 07, McNabb got hurt. Well, no, actually, even with Garcia, that would have been interesting, him playing with Garcia. Well, we probably wouldn't have had Garcia. So
He hated Garcia.
Yeah, but in a second they make the Super Bowl. In fact, I mean, shoot, if it wasn't for the contract dispute in 05, they might have got back in 05. I mean, that totally derailed the whole situation. That 04 team could have made a run again.
Sure could. What's interesting is he hated Garcia when he played with the 49ers. He used to say Garcia was gay. He said, "You're gay." And here, Jeff Garcia was married to a Playboy Playmate of the Year. I mean, his wife was smoking.
I remember that.
I mean, this just goes to show how what a lunatic this guy was.
He was just small-minded, young-minded.
Yeah.
Where he had his day-to-day thought process was like that of a 9-year-old.
Yeah. It's just he was just great.
Get out of my sandbox.
Yeah. This is my sandbox. I'm the king. Yeah.
So Sean with the point here. I would have loved to have seen another year with T.O. after the Super Bowl, but his beef with McNabb, speaking his mind, he's the odd man out. Would have bet we went to the playoffs and possibly the Super Bowl. Yeah, you're right. And, and you're right. And, of course, we finished the list with T.O., but obviously, if we extrapolated this, obviously Deshaun Jackson would rank up here with what he did. Deshaun Jackson had a hell of a career.
Good years here, yeah.
Yeah, Macklin. Yeah, well, Deshaun first time around. The second time around, he played 2 games. Jeremy Macklin had a nice career here, but even though Macklin was good, I wouldn't put Macklin ahead of any of these guys.
No, I wouldn't put Macklin ahead of Freddie Barnett.
Honestly,
of these guys,
the only guy I would consider putting Deshaun ahead of would have possibly been Fred Barnett. But honestly though, Fred Barnett could do more things. Deshaun was the deep threat, but if you're talking total receiver, Fred Barnett was probably a better receiver
and more durable.
Yeah,
I mean, Deshaun Jackson just signed with the Ravens, and he's already out again. He didn't even play a game. He got hurt in practice. He pulled a hamstring or something.
He's at the point. He's at the point of his career right now where it's like
there is no career.
It's over.
It's over. He just can't accept it. I mean, that's the problem with a lot of these guys. I mean, they've been doing it for so many years, and it's the only thing they know, and they've been great at it, and they've always got a nice check from it. Next thing you know, it's like, how do you take? It's like my father used to always say, you got to burn the uniform off some of these guys. And really,
it's almost like Lefty Carlton at the end of his career.
Oh, yeah, it's sad.
Moses at the end of his career.
Willie Mays.
Moses at the end of his career.
Willie Mays
you had
the best example.
Willie Mays. I mean, at the end,
Johnny Unitas playing for the Rams.
He played for the Chargers.
Or the Chargers. I'm sorry, the Chargers.
Willie Mays is the classic example because he was in the '73 World Series against Baltimore when the Mets played them again. He muffed a ball in center field that he would have had 1,000,000 times over, with effortless. But I mean, he just didn't belong out there. He was probably close to 40 years old at the time.
He had to be, yeah.
He was over 40. He had no business being out there, but he was Willie Mays. And what are you going to do? He still couldn't,
face of the league.
It was the face of the league, and they lost the Mets lost the series. That lost a big game for him. When you only have 7 games max, you gotta, you you can't have you gotta have your best guys out.
And those guys didn't take care of themselves.
No,
I don't mean that they neglected themselves, but
It's not like today.
it's not like today where, Christ, diet and
trainers,
sleep habits, and
oh yeah,
they go through the whole list to keep, and all these guys are buying into it.
Yeah, but
and not only that, guys that are playing today, regardless of the sport, and especially baseball, because baseball's more like a club sport now. A kid gets into baseball if he's good when he's young, and then the next thing you know, that's all he does. Especially you see it with pitchers. I mean, most of them don't do anything else.
yeah.
And then they go to these camps, and then they just work on their craft because it's
Yeah.
you can do that with baseball.
But hey, you know what? I hope everybody enjoyed this walk down memory lane.
Is there
I
any
hope
questions?
I hope we no, I don't see any questions, but I hope everybody enjoyed some of these memories. And like my uncle said, in a couple weeks we're going to be going the biggest D-bags.
2 weeks from tonight, it's going to be the biggest D-bags in Philadelphia sports. And then our 2 shows in December are going to be, the first one's going to be on Wilt Chamberlain. The second one will be on the Buddy Ryan years. And then in the new year, we're going to have a lot of different concepts. One's going to be, again, Philly sports. We're going to focus on some teams like the 83, the build up to the 83 Sixers championship team, the build up to the 1980 Phillies World Series team, the Flyers Cup years in the middle 70s. I also want to do a show on players that changed the game that they were in. We talked about earlier. I love all those ideas, but the players that changed the game. I mean, I'm like really excited for that one because that's also so debatable too, because people beauty of
because people can have their own idea. Like some like your generation would say Wilt Chamberlain, where a modern day guy would say Steph Curry. But neither's necessarily wrong because they both changed the game.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Another thing that I want to do is
a lot of them would say Michael Jordan.
Yeah. Well,
and all the greats changed the game to some degree.
Yeah. You know what I think changed the NBA more than anything? The Dream Team. The Dream Team made
94.
No, 92. Yeah, 92. The Dream Team brought NBA basketball globally, and if it wasn't for the Dream Team, you may not have had guys like Ginobili, Dirk Nowitzki, the young kid. The kid coming out in the draft, I can't say his name. There's a kid coming out next year from France that scouts are saying he may be the best prospect they've ever seen. Maybe even more than LeBron. He's like 7'2", can shoot the ball. I mean, the only knock on him it might be he's a little skinny, so maybe somebody backs him down.
Sounds like an agent prepared.
Yeah.
Comment, but
yeah,
we'll see.
Another thing on shows we're going to do. Obviously, we want to get some guests. There's a lot of people that live in this area, like the old Flyers, and we tried to have Tommy Green on our show one time. The '93 Phillies. We want to do a show on them, and maybe we can get Tommy Green and Sonny Hill would be good. Another show I want to definitely do, maybe even 2 shows on it, would be classic rivalries, Bird Magic. Ali Frazier, Sixers Celtics.
Definitely.
It's we've got some great programming coming down the road for the next calendar year, as opposed to the balance of this year. So, give us a like, give us a share. Like I said,
Sean got the name for me, Victor Wembanyama.
Yeah.
Yeah, kid,
I've read about him.
Yeah, kid's unbelievable. But hey, all right. Well, listen, we're going to get ready to wrap up. But before we do, let me give a shout out to our sponsors and a thank you. The first, we got Philly Sports Trips. He does a great job. Does all the road games. The next one is actually in Indianapolis. Now, I'm not going. I didn't go on this trip, but I'm actually going to be out at that game. I'm going to Notre Dame, Boston College, and then I'm doing Eagles Colts. So maybe I'll be able to hook up with some of those guys.
If not, you'll see somebody from Philadelphia there.
Oh, definitely.
Probably 3/4 of the stadium.
By that time, yeah.
Yeah, well, and the Colts are.
Yeah, and they suck.
They just fired Reich.
Yeah, they just fired Reich. Yeah.
So we got Eagles Game Day Live. Edge of Philly Sports provides a pregame show, a halftime show, and a postgame show. So make sure you check it out. www.eopsports.com. Speaking of if you're at a away game, if you're an Eagles fan and you act a fool and you need some legal advice, make sure you get in touch with my man David R. Cherry Esquire. Workers' compensation, motor vehicle accidents, injury, and criminal law. www.cherryinjurylaw.com.
Yeah, I'm an attorney. If he's watching, Dave, I'm a fellow attorney as well.
For all you Flyers fans out there, my man Matty's post-game show. It's called Clear the Ice, Philadelphia Edge of Philly Sports. Make sure you check him out. Here's us. Yeah, this is us again.
The old school. That's and of course you see the Sullivan crest.
So obviously, since we're doing biggest D-bags, it'll be a different
graphic.
Maybe we'll have like Ben Simmons and Norman Brayman and who knows what else out there.
Katz.
Oh, Harold Katz. Oh yeah, he's got it.
Don Tollefson.
Yeah.
Don't give it away.
I don't want to give it away, but
I think most people kind of know. Philly sports fans are.
What's going to make it interesting is the round robin when we do our NCAA tournament final.
And here's all the shows on Edge of Philly Sports. It's got a great lineup here. A little bit for everybody. Like I said, we already got into some of them. And there's even a union show and also a lacrosse show. So anybody who likes lacrosse out there, check those guys out. Check out all the shows. Give us a like and a listen if you can.
And one other thing I had talked about earlier with my nephew and my cousin. I didn't mention this to Al. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But
look at this guy. Wait, hang on a second. Look at this guy. I love weed. I need a lawyer. Sheagles suck. Well, hey, listen, brother, no problem out there, man. If you need a lawyer, hit my man David R. Cherry out there.
There you go.
Make sure you don't get caught with too much of that, John. All right.
We have one thing I'd like to do before we, next year as well is have a crossover shows with some of these, maybe with some of these other. I know that there's a group that does Giants. Cowboys and
there's a lot of ideas.
We have a lot of good ideas coming down the pike. So
all right, well listen, hey, thanks a lot. Thanks for your time. Hope you enjoyed the walk down memory lane, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Have a great week, everybody.